May 27th, 1943. Pacific Ocean, 850 miles south of Hawaii. The B-24 bomber called the Green Hornet falls from the sky. Both engines dead, no power, 8 tons of metal and 11 men plummeting toward the ocean at terminal velocity. Inside, a 26-year-old bombardier named Louis Zamperini braces for impact. 4 years earlier, he'd run in the Olympics, met Adolf Hitler in Berlin, finished the final lap in 56 seconds, catching the Führer's attention. Now he's about to crash into the Pacific Ocean. And what happens next, the 47 days that follow, will break the world record for survival at sea. But that's not the hard part. The plane hits the water at 200 miles per hour. The fuselage crumples like paper. The wings shear off. 8 men die instantly. Louis is trapped underwater, tangled in wires, sinking fast. And then he wakes up, somehow freed from the wires, somehow at the surface, his life vest inflated by carbon dioxide canisters. He would later say he didn't know how it happened. Why had I woken again? How had I been loosed from the wires while unconscious? Some called it luck. He would eventually call it something else. 3 men survived the crash: Louis Zamperini, Russell Allen Phil Phillips, the pilot, and Francis Mac McNamara, the tail gunner. 2 inflatable rafts, a few chocolate bars, some flares, fishing line, and an ocean that stretches 2,000 miles in every direction. The world record for survival at sea? 34 days. They would break that record, and then spend another 13 days drifting, starving, dying of thirst, fighting off sharks, strafed by Japanese bombers. But here's what nobody talks about. The 47 days at sea weren't the hard part. The 2 years in a Japanese prison camp weren't the hard part. The hard part was coming home. Because when Louis Zamperini came back to America in 1945, he was a hero. Olympic athlete, survived the impossible, decorated soldier, ticker tape parades, marriage to a beautiful woman, a daughter, fame, comfort, everything a man could want. And he was dying inside. Every night he dreamed of being tortured, of a Japanese guard beating him to death, of drowning in the ocean, of thirst. Every night he woke up screaming. Every night his hands would find his wife's throat, thinking she was the man who'd tortured him for 2 years. And every night he drank himself into oblivion to make the dreams stop. This is the story of Louis Zamperini, and the question isn't, how did he survive 47 days at sea, or how did he survive 2 years of torture? The question is, how do you survive coming home? How do you forgive the unforgivable? And can a man be broken so completely that nothing, not fame, not family, not safety, can put him back together? Louis Zamperini was not born a hero. He was born a troublemaker. January 26, 1917, Olean, New York. Italian immigrant parents, dirt poor, Depression-era America. And young Louis was, in his own words, a delinquent. Smoking by age 5, drinking by age 8, fought constantly, stole from neighbours, once deflated a teacher's car tires after she disciplined him, threw tomatoes at a policeman. The town of Torrance, California, where his family moved, knew him as the kid who'd probably end up in jail. And then someone suggested he try running. He hated it at first. Too much work, too much pain. But Louis discovered something. When you're running, nobody's chasing you. You're in control. And he was fast, impossibly fast. By age 19, in 1936, Louis Zamperini qualified for the Olympics, the youngest American 5,000-meter runner ever. Berlin, Germany. Adolf Hitler's Olympics, the Nazi propaganda games. Louis didn't win, he finished 8th. But in the final lap, he ran 56 seconds, a sprint finish that caught everyone's attention, including Hitler. After the race, the Führer reportedly told him, "Ah, you're the boy with the fast finish." Louis was 19 years old, shaking hands with Adolf Hitler and thinking, "I'm going to come back in 1940 and win gold." This was who he was, competitive, driven, never satisfied with second place. 4 years later, he'd be setting records, breaking 4 minutes in the mile, dominating American track. The 1940 Olympics in Tokyo were his goal, and then Japan invaded China. The Olympics were cancelled, and Louis Zamperini joined the Army Air Corps. November 1941. Louis became a bombardier, B-24 Liberators, flying over the Pacific, bombing Japanese positions. He flew multiple missions. On one, Japanese fighters riddled his plane with over 600 bullets. It limped back to base. Louis survived. But the B-24s, nicknamed flying coffins, had a reputation for mechanical failures. May 27, 1943. A routine search and rescue mission, looking for a lost crew. The only plane available, the Green Hornet. A musher, a plane with known mechanical problems. Its tail flew below its nose. Nobody wanted to fly it. Louis and his crew took it anyway. What could possibly go wrong? 850 miles south of Oahu, both engines fail. The Green Hornet falls. Impact, 200 miles per hour. 11 men on board. 8 dead instantly. 3 survivors, Louis, Phil, and Mac. 2 rubber rafts, each about 7 feet long. Rations, 2 chocolate bars per man, 3 pints of water total. The plan, 2 squares of chocolate and 3 sips of water per day. At this rate, they could last maybe a week. Maybe. Problem, Mac panics. On the first night, while Louis and Phil sleep, Mac eats all his chocolate. All of it. This is a death sentence. Louis knows it, Phil knows it, but Mac is catatonic, guilt-stricken, can't even speak. Louis doesn't yell, doesn't hit him, doesn't throw him overboard. He just lets it go, because Mac is already dying from guilt, and they need to conserve energy. Days blur together. They catch birds, albatrosses that land on the raft, eat the raw flesh, use the rest as bait for fish. They catch maybe 1 or 2 tiny fish every few days. They collect rainwater when storms pass, pour it into the empty water tins. They tell stories, pretend to cook elaborate meals, describe the taste of imaginary steak, anything to keep their minds from food. By day 10, they're skeletal, skin stretched over bones, sores covering their bodies, beards growing wild. Louis, who weighed 155 pounds when the plane crashed, will eventually drop to 67 pounds, less than half his body weight. They're dying, slowly. Every day sharks circle the raft. They bump it, test it, waiting. One day a shark attacks. Mac, quiet, broken Mac, grabs an oar and beats it back. For a moment, he's useful again. Day 28. They see a plane. Finally, rescue. Louis fires flares, waves frantically. The plane circles, once, twice, and then opens fire. It's Japanese. Bullets tear through the water, through the rafts. Louis and Phil dive overboard. Sharks below, bullets above. Mac stays in the raft, too weak to move. Somehow, miraculously, none of them are hit, but one raft is destroyed, unsalvageable. Now they're down to 1 raft, 3 men, ocean stretching forever. Day 30. They've run out of water. Again. 6 days without a drop. Lips cracked and bleeding. Tongues swollen. Louis, who'd prayed exactly once in his life as a child, starts praying aloud. He doesn't know any real prayers, so he recites bits he remembers from movies. Phil joins in. Amen. Mac says nothing. And Louis makes a promise. God, if you quench our thirst, I'll dedicate my life to you. That night, it rains. Mac dies, quietly. No dramatic final words, no struggle. He just stops. They hold a brief service and slide his body into the ocean. Louis and Phil don't talk about it. What's there to say? The next day, day 34, they break the world record for survival at sea. 34 days. The previous Navy record. They don't celebrate. They don't even realize it until later. They just keep drifting. Days 35 to 40. They drift into the doldrums, the intertropical convergence zone near the equator. No wind, no waves, just perfect, placid stillness. Blue sky, blue water, blue everywhere. It's beautiful, and it's hell. Because in the stillness, there's no distraction from the thirst, the hunger, the pain. Years later, Louis would say, "On that raft, I was the only one prepared." He'd attended a survival lecture, one of 15 men out of thousands invited. He'd paid attention, learned to catch fish, collect rainwater, ration food, stay calm. Most people would call it luck that he'd attended that lecture. Louis would later call it providence. July 13th, 1943. After drifting nearly 2,000 miles, the raft washes onto the Marshall Islands. Land. Finally. They've survived. Louis and Phil, skin and bones, can barely stand. They crawl onto the beach, and then they see the Japanese soldiers. They survived 47 days at sea, set a world record, outlasted sharks, storms, starvation, and Japanese strafing. And now they're prisoners of the very people who tried to kill them on day 28. Louis looks at Phil. Phil looks at Louis. Neither speaks. What's there to say? They've survived the ocean. Now comes the hard part. The Japanese soldiers are shocked. 2 skeletons, Americans, barely alive. They give them a small meal, water, interrogate them briefly, and then begin the process of breaking them. Louis and Phil are separated. Louis is sent to Kwajalein, nicknamed Execution Island. 6 weeks of starvation, beatings, and interrogation. Then transferred to Ofuna, an interrogation camp near Tokyo. Then Omori, a POW camp on an island in Tokyo Bay. And finally, Naoetsu, a coal mining camp in northern Japan. 4 camps, 2.5 years. At every camp, Louis has one problem. He's famous. Olympic athlete, American hero. The newspapers back home had reported him dead, and now he's alive. A propaganda opportunity. The Japanese want to use him, put him on the radio, have him denounce America. Louis refuses, and that refusal marks him. At a Mori camp, Louis meets Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe. The prisoners call him the Bird. Watanabe is 27 years old, former student, from a wealthy family, applied to be an officer but was rejected, assigned to guard duty instead. Humiliated, angry, and he takes it out on the prisoners, but especially on Louis. Every day the Bird finds Louis. Every day he beats him. Sometimes with fists, sometimes with a belt buckle, sometimes with a wooden club. He forces Louis to stand at attention for hours, in the cold, in the heat. He makes Louis hold a heavy wooden beam above his head, for 37 minutes. If Louis lowers it even an inch, the bird beats him. He forces Louis to clean the camp's latrines, to shovel coal, to perform the most degrading tasks, and through it all, the bird smiles. Why Louis specifically? Because Louis is famous, because he won't break, because he's American, but mostly because the bird is jealous. Watanabe wanted to be an officer, to have status, to be respected. Louis was an Olympian, had met Hitler, was celebrated. Everything Watanabe wanted to be, Louis already was. So Watanabe destroys him, slowly, methodically. Not to kill him, that would be too quick. To break his spirit. The other prisoners watch. Sometimes the bird forces them to hit Louis. If they refuse, they're beaten too. So they hit him, lightly, apologetically. The bird laughs. One prisoner, years later, said, "Watanabe was the most sadistic man I ever met, and Louis was his favourite victim." How does Louis survive? The same way he survived on the raft. He goes somewhere else in his mind. When the bird beats him, Louis thinks about running, imagines the track, the crowd, the finish line. When he's forced to stand at attention for hours, he plans meals, elaborate 7-course dinners he'll eat when he gets home. When he's shoveling coal in the freezing cold, he runs races in his head. Winter 1944. Louis weighs less than 70 pounds now. Dysentery, beriberi, pneumonia. The other prisoners think he's going to die. One night, the bird comes to Louis's bunk, and for once, he doesn't beat him. Instead, he just looks at him and says, "You will die here." Louis looks back and says, "No, I won't." It costs him. That night, the bird beats him worse than ever before. But Louis doesn't take it back. Because if he agrees, if he admits defeat, the bird wins. And Louis Zamperini does not lose. August 1945. Atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. The POW camps are liberated. Louis Zamperini, who'd been declared dead by the War Department in 1944, is alive. American planes fly over Naoetsu camp, drop supplies, food, medicine, cigarettes, notes, "War over, you're going home." The prisoners, skeletal and weak, cheer. Louis collapses. It's over. He survived. 2.5 years of torture, daily beatings, starvation. Louis Zamperini boards a plane home. Olympic hero, war survivor, American legend. The newspapers call him Unbroken. Ticker tape parades await. Fame, marriage, a daughter, everything a man could want. But Louis knows something the newspapers don't. He's already broken. Completely. And the hardest part is just beginning. October 1945. Louis Zamperini arrives in California. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting questions. Crowds cheering. How did you survive? What was it like? Are you glad to be home? Louis smiles, waves, says all the right things, and inside, he's screaming. 1946. Louis marries Cynthia Applewhite. Beautiful, kind, in love with the war hero. They have a daughter, buy a house, live the American dream. Louis goes on speaking tours, tells his survival story, gets standing ovations. Everyone wants to meet the man who survived 47 days at sea. everyone wants to hear about the hero who endured Japanese torture. And every night Louis goes home, and every night he dreams. They're always the same. The bird standing over him, belt buckle raised, beating him, again and again. Louis can feel it, the pain, the humiliation, and he can't wake up. Cynthia wakes to find Louis's hands around her throat, choking her. His eyes open but unseeing, lost in the dream. She screams his name, fights him off. Louis snaps back, realizes what he's doing. Lets go. I'm sorry, I thought you were him. I thought you were the bird. This happens once a week, then twice a week, then every night. This is what nobody talks about. Louis Zamperini survived the ocean, survived the torture, that he can't survive being home. Because at sea, the enemy was clear. Thirst, sharks, the ocean. In the camp, the enemy was clear. The bird, starvation, disease. But at home, the enemy is inside his head, and he can't fight. I made a promise, he says, and he kneels. That night, Louis goes home. For the first time in 4 years, he doesn't drink. For the first time in 4 years, he doesn't dream of the bird. He sleeps through the night. When he wakes up, Cynthia is staring at him. You didn't have a nightmare. I know. How? I don't know. Days pass, then weeks. No nightmares, no desire to drink, no rage. Louis tells Cynthia, I don't feel angry anymore. I don't want to kill him. She doesn't believe it. How does that just disappear? Louis doesn't have an answer. He just knows something changed. 1950, 1 year after the tent. Louis Zamperini goes back to Japan, not to kill the bird, to forgive him. He visits Sagamo prison, where many of his former guards are being held as war criminals. He walks through the halls, men who beat him, starved him, tortured him, and one by one he shakes their hands. Some embrace him, some cry. One guard converts to Christianity on the spot. Louis feels nothing. No anger, no hatred, just peace. He asks to see Mutsuhiro Watanabe, the bird, the man who beat him every day for 2 years. But Watanabe refused the meeting. He's listed as number 23 on Japan's most wanted war criminals list. But he's never been executed, never prosecuted. He's living somewhere in Japan, under a new name. Louis writes him a letter. I forgive you. He never receives a response. Here's the question nobody wants to ask. Was Louis right to forgive? The bird tortured him, broke him, nearly killed him, and he got away with it. No trial, no punishment, no justice. Is forgiveness without justice even meaningful, or is it just letting evil win? Louis would say, forgiveness isn't for him, it's for me. As long as he hated the bird controlled him, the nightmares, the drinking, the rage. The bird was still torturing him, every night. Forgiveness cut that connection. It wasn't about letting the bird off the hook. It was about freeing himself from the hook. But critics would say, you let a war criminal escape justice. Watanabe should have been prosecuted, imprisoned, held accountable. By forgiving him publicly, Louis gave him cover, made it easier for Japan to sweep these crimes under the rug. Personal healing versus societal justice. Which matters more? Louis Zamperini lived to be 97 years old, never drank again, never had another nightmare. Started a camp for troubled youth, Victory Boys Camp. Became an inspirational speaker, travelled the world. returned to Japan multiple times, met with more former guards, carried the Olympic torch at the 1998 Nagano Winter Games in Japan, married to Cynthia for 54 years until her death in 2001. Can someone change? Louis did, from delinquent to Olympian, from prisoner to survivor, from alcoholic to counselor. But did he change? Or did something change him? Louis would say, "I didn't change myself. I couldn't. I tried for 4 years. Someone changed me." And what about the bird? Did he change? We don't know. Watanabe lived until 2003, died at age 85. Never prosecuted, never apologized. Gave a few interviews late in life, insisting he'd just been following orders. Some say he felt remorse privately. Others say he felt nothing. We'll never know, because unlike Louis, he never faced his past. July 2nd, 2014. Louis Zamperini dies, age 97, pneumonia. Outlived all his guards, outlived the bird. At his funeral, they play a recording of his testimony, given at a Billy Graham crusade in 1958. "I was broken, completely broken, and I couldn't fix myself. I tried drinking, I tried anger, I tried revenge. Nothing worked. And then I remembered the promise I'd made on that raft, and I realized God kept his promise. He brought me home alive. So I kept mine. I gave him my life, and he gave me peace." Lines across Asia. Louis Zamperini drifted 2,000 miles across the Pacific, survived Japanese prison camps, returned to Japan as a missionary. His journey across Asia wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. From hatred to forgiveness, from broken to whole, from prisoner to free. And the question his life asks us, what do you do with suffering? Let it destroy you? Use it to destroy others? Or somehow, impossibly, transform it into something that heals? Louis chose the third path, not because he was strong, but because he finally admitted he was broken. And that admission, that moment of surrender in a tent in Los Angeles, changed everything. 47 days at sea, 2 years in hell, one man's forgiveness, Unbroken.